unless we come up with a goal framework that's centered on implementation. Which leads me to two things, which I will close in with. One is the multidimensional poverty index. I invite all of you, I don't have a chance to talk about this, but Columbia, with the support of Oxford University and others, is working on a multidimensional poverty index, which we're already applying at home. And what it is that poverty is not about income. Income is completely irrelevant when you really talk about poverty. In many cases, you can have decent income and still be poor in many ways, or vice versa. It's very context specific and relative. So what we're talking about here are multiple deprivations. Poverty is a sum of multiple deprivations, and you need specific indicators for those different deprivations, and that's what we're doing. And by doing so, by creating this framework around multidimensionality, we have created a space for all the policy sectors, all the line ministries with responsibilities to be involved, and they have to be articulated. So we exactly address the kind of synergies and trade-offs that Eva and Wael were mentioning. It's also a very effective tool for effective distribution of both efforts and resources in terms of geographic inequalities, populational inequalities, etc. So this is, if you will, like a public policy control panel. As I say, I invite you to look into multidimensional poverty index, because that's also an example, another side of the same coin of the waves and the other kind of accounting that Eva was talking about. And here to finish in the negotiations, we put today forward formally, many have seen this for the last months, where we put it forward today formally, a concept paper on what we call the integrating approach. There's a side event that will go into the detail of that tomorrow. We invite you to conference room 7, no, conference room 2 tomorrow I think it's in the other building. And the integrating approach says, let's start off by looking at the targets. I have a real issue with UN agencies and constituencies that come forward and say, we want our own standalone goal. Yeah, everybody wants their own standalone goal. Everything's important. But if we all have our own little standalone goals, we're going to end up with 200 or 300 standalone goals. You would laugh if it wasn't so serious of the issues that I have been put forward for standalone goals. It goes everything from breast milk and diarrhea to nuclear waste to space debris. All of that needs a standalone goal. It's impossible. It won't add up to the kind of really succinct, well-structured goal framework that we need. Metrics matter, but they only matter if they make sense. So what we're calling for is that we focus on the targets, on the key substantive issues that we need for implementation, and work our way up. Now, nothing is going to be a purely bottom-up approach. Obviously, it's going to be a bottom-up approach informed by top-down reference. But the idea is that we will be able to avoid this multiplicity of goals and really, above all, look at the linkages between the sectors, because the way to overcome silos is not to come up with more silos or more baskets. It's to understand that the baskets are completely interrelated. And one of the most revolutionary aspects, I think, of what we're calling for is for there to be shared targets across those. I won't go into too much detail. I really invite you either to read the concept paper we put forward. It's available electronically. The presentation we're putting forward tomorrow is also available electronically. And please, if you think that this is a good idea, we need to continue thinking how we actually do it, how we operationalize it. So Columbia puts this forward in the most constructive, open way possible. We're not wedded to a particular way of doing it, but we just put it forward because we think that unless we come up with a sound and sensible methodology for defining the SDGs, we're going to come up with just a reiteration of the kind of silos that we're trying to avoid. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Round of applause. And now, if you're not too hungry, we still have a couple of minutes for perhaps questions from before, or comments or remarks. You could just raise the hand and.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on some of the YMCA. Society is a good keyword. It's the way we are organized. Every government is organized society. Why? Because it allows us to concentrate expertise to address individual problems. That means that when we start talking about breaking down silos, we have to be very clear what we're trying to do. I mean, we're not trying to get rid of expertise or turn everybody into a generalist. That won't work, and that will encounter tremendous pushback if we try it. What we really mean when we talk about breaking down silos is getting the different silos to communicate and integrate with each other, so that they bring their respective expertises in to a common approach to a joint problem. That's essentially a problem of language, is getting the environmentalists to speak a language that the economists can understand, and vice versa. And it's getting the economists to think about the economic problems from the point of view spillovers from the environmental or the social side, and the impact that economic policies will have spilling over into the environmental and the social sphere, and to take those into account in the formulation of policy. Unfortunately, I don't think that is really something that is done very well, particularly with regard to the environment. I'll give a concrete example. We talk a lot about carbon taxation and reform energy subsidies. If you go to a finance list and say you should tax carbon and reform energy subsidies because it's good for the environment, you'll get nowhere. Because that's not their language. Tell that same finance minister, however, that introducing a carbon tax can do wonders for this deficit. And removing the carbon subsidy really give room for doing social extension. All of a sudden you have a dialogue with it. It's putting the common objective into the language that each individual can understand depending on what the circumstances. That is breaking down the science and language. And perhaps we should think about it a little bit more that way, because clearly you are not very good.
Thank you. So it's sort of translation problem in some ways. Other comments before?
Thank you. Robert Conway from we were also sharing with the that if every agency has a goal, you have this big SDG cloud with so many different. Okay. We have this big, we call it an SDG cloud in our campus, or it could be a Christmas tree, because everybody wants to put what they think should be a goal into the SDGs. And we can already see that the number is easily over 50 possible goals that we have. But if we can differentiate better, and I think one of the co-chairs said this yesterday, between what are goals and what are enabling activities. And so many of the things that are being proposed as goals. UNCTAD says we don't want to propose trade to be a goal, because it's not a goal, it's an enabler. And enablers are perhaps just as important as goals, because every enabler, whether it be finance or technology or human rights or trade, it works across all of the goals. It's almost like you could have a matrix with goals and columns, and working horizontally across all of these goals, you have different enablers. And then if you could break down under each goal what the enabler, what policy framework is needed at the national and international level in order to promote achievement of the goal, as far as any given specific enabler is concerned. So for trade, we can think of a number of things. Say to advance environmental sustainability, and to promote education for all, or to promote healthcare and healthcare for all, or maybe to promote jobs and decent employment. So for these kind of very clearly defined, simple to understand, and limited in number of goals, like education, health, environmental sustainability, or decent work, we keep the number small, we keep the number easily visible and readily comprehensible to the type of people that we're making these goals for. Then, in fact, we could just work horizontally and take many of these important issues that are currently being proposed as goals, make them enablers, and give them a prominent role to play in advancing the achievement of each one of these goals. It might be a framework that would work. And I just want to refer to one thing. If we look at the LDC Plan of Actions, if any of you here have been involved in the LDC conferences that take place every 10 years, there's a number of objectives in the Plan of Action. And for each Plan of Action, there's what the development community has to do, what the countries themselves have to do, and what civil society and the private sector can do. And it's not legally binding, but it's a framework and it's guidelines that can be giving guidance and direction to those stakeholders who are going to have to do something to advance the achievement of the goal. So this is what we're thinking, at least at UNCTAD. We don't want to propose trade as a goal, but we want to see whatever the goals are, we're going to try to work with the member states in order to define what needs to be done in trade policy at the national and international level to achieve these goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My name is Fatima Rodrigo and I represent International Presentation Association. The post-2015 development agenda, the formulation of it, also must consider breaking down silos when it comes to participation of people living in poverty. I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
point. I think times perhaps we could have some remarks from the panel on the questions and then we will ask about the last comment. Thank you.
I would just like to respond quickly to what Elliot said and what Ted was saying. Actually, in Colombia, we've decided to practice what we preach, so we're applying the integrating approach right now as we speak. We're trying it on for sites. And the results have been quite amazing, and it has to do partially with actually learning to talk the same language, no question, but it's also about understanding that there's shared targets among sectors. I'll give you a concrete example. Each sector came up with their very specific targets that they would focus on, not only in a Colombian context, but in a global context. What would be the key issues? And when the Ministry of Mines took the floor, we were all we all had a sense of what the Ministry of Mines and Energy was going to say. And they said the most important thing, the only target that they really wanted to fight for was formalization of the sector. And it was a revolution. Ministry of Housing was taking the floor, Ministry of Education, all the ministries were taking the floor and saying, that's my target too. I need that also. And the process, which was a process to feed into this, has taken on such a huge dynamism that now the National Planning Department is leading on this, and it's become this huge policy, I'm not really sure what you would call it, like a policy revisiting exercise with all the ministries engaging in the level and in a way that they never had before, because they are used to coming from trying to understand what their issues are and how they can translate them for others. That's the most that they have done. So yes, that's the first step that's really important. This is going even one step further to understanding that actually targets can be shared across sectors. And it's been quite revolutionary what's happened in Colombia. And by the way, completely unexpected. We never expected it to get such dynamism. But understanding that the same issues are shared, and that is one of the many examples that I could bring to the table. So I think that the integrating approach is about learning to communicate, but it's also about understanding that the synergies and the trade-offs, the opportunities, the win-wins are much closer to home than we would think. And also when you talk about things like equity and resilience, and you'll see that in the presentation tomorrow for those of you who come, if you say an equity goal or a resilience goal, it means absolutely nothing, and it's really hard to sit there and think about how you unpack that. But actually, if we take away those silos and put on, sort of more integrating lenses, the targets we need for that are actually already on the table. They've already been put forward, except we're not seeing them because we're blinded by things fitting into food security or into maternal mortality or into whatever. So I think that we do have to go one step further, and I think with regards to listening to the voices of the poor, there's a big effort in the high-level panel to do that. And I think that that's where the UN really comes in, because for governments it's hard to do that, to generate spaces like what UNEP and UNDP have been done with voices of the we the world, what is it? All these spaces, these websites that Olaf was referring to earlier, where it's possible for civil society to participate. Obviously the very poorest don't have a shot at internet access, but that's really a space and a gap that I think civil society working in close collaboration with governments can help to fill.
Just by way of example, in terms of where the statistical community can assist, if you talk, the role that UNCTAD sees for trade, for the different sort of aspects in economy, society, and environment, we would be able to inform you how to make these things, because in the statistical frameworks that we have, we know how to demonstrate how you trade in value added, in income, in jobs, in natural resources, in pollutants, and we can actually assist you in visualizing actually how you actually would be able to inform that sort of connections of trade into the economy and environment. Now, I'm not going to say that this is exactly what we have to go, that is something that's still have to be negotiated, but when we're in the room, we will be able to demonstrate these interlinkages that we talk about and developing that common language across these different sort of implementing areas. And that is, I think, where we can think in that space of integration of policy and then also the information system that informs that kind of policy.
Thank you so much. I think our meeting unfortunately is drawing to a close. I'd like first to thank our nice panel, and perhaps give them a round of applause. And really, it was really an inspiring meeting. and thank all of you, thank the interpreters as well. And but it's not finished because you can still discuss the issue. Right now outside we have a night refreshment. You really deserve it.